Is it worth the risk to keep on going?
Sure, to win. I mean, that's what we've always done. The money's never been a factor. We raced when we didn't have any.
There was a reason he was known as the Intimidator. With 76 victories and millions of dollars in prizes, having an enduring legacy imprinted on Daytona's asphalt, Dale Earnhardt Sr. was more than a driver. He was a representation of Southern motorsport royalty, unwavering grit, and fearless control. However, on February 18th, 21st, all came to an end in a startling moment. In the last lap, what appeared to be just another bump became the crash that rocked NASCAR to its foundation and silenced a legend. What happened next was devastating. What actually happened at Daytona? The final lap, he had been here before. Same roar, same track of the mob, the same sharp curves at frightful speed. Dale Earnhardt's cathedral was Daytona. He was familiar with all of its long straights and high banks. He had bled on it, controlled it. Above its finish line, it lifted trophies. And that afternoon in February, even though he wasn't in the lead, he was making a significant contribution. He was keeping it safe. During the 2001 Daytona 500's last lap, Dale Earnhardt Sr. was containing the bundle. Michael Waltrip, his driver, and his son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., were up front, battling for victory. Behind them, Dale Sr. was obstructing, using his vehicle as a bodyguard, protecting the inside line when sliding. It was a well-thought-out action. He wasn't no longer only racing for himself. He was participating in a fast-paced chess tournament as team captain, where a single error would spell calamity. Then it took place. Turn 4 was upon them, and the checkered Sterling Marlin's vehicle slid into Earnhardt's rear quarter panel, just seconds away. It wasn't aggressive. This type of interaction occurred dozens of times per race. However, at even a slight prod can be fatal when traveling at 150 miles per hour. Earnhardt's vehicle swerved downward, snapped up toward the wall, then down a little. As Ken Schrader's vehicle approached next to him, the two cars collided. Dale's number 3 Chevrolet struck the outside barrier head-on. It didn't appear to be disastrous. Not initially. The vehicle skidded to a stop after colliding with the wall. No fire was present. Not a lot of drama. No parts explosion. There was a crash. However, nothing that would cause terror gasps from spectators. It appeared to be livable, if anything. The type of this time was different from the wreck Dale had left 100 times before. He was first contacted by Ken Schrader. He exited his own smashed car and hurried away to the third car's driver's side. He almost instantly backed away from what he saw. His expression changed. His stance shifted. Later, he informed reporters that he would not elaborate on what he observed. He knew Dale had just seen death, not because he wished to keep him safe. Medical personnel showed up promptly. After extracting Earnhardt from the debris, they hurried him to Halifax Medical Center. The entire world waited. Silently, the fans stood. Pit crews halted their activities. At the finish of the race, broadcasters, who were often animated and chatty, spoke in low voices. They didn't unaware of it yet, but NASCAR has undergone a permanent transformation. Doctors confirmed at 5:16 p.m. what many already dreaded. Senior Dale Earnhardt has passed away. The impact killed him instantly. The individual who had established his image on fear and audacity, and who had appeared unbreakable, was no longer there. However, how? How could the most seasoned driver on the circuit be destroyed by such a minor-looking collision? and the autopsy would show that. And fans were shocked by what it revealed. The Volusia County Medical Examiner's autopsy report verified that Earnhardt passed away from a fracture of the basilar skull. This kind of damage is a serious fracture near the base of the skull, frequently affecting the region surrounding the brainstem. It is one of the most deadly kinds of head trauma, and is usually brought on by an abrupt, dramatic slowdown, which is just what occurred when Earnhardt's vehicle struck the wall quickly. The actual crash only lasted a few seconds. However, there were tremendous forces at play. A ring fracture was the description given to the fracture, going around the skull's base. This type of injury results in immediate brain loss. Function. Dale Earnhardt died, to put it simply, as his head swung forward and then violently jerked back when struck. It happened quickly. Quiet. Final. There was no discomfort. A sudden, irrevocable stillness, without awareness. Other conclusions drawn from the autopsy showed a shattered left ankle, fractured ribs, blunt force damage to the chest, and abrasions from the wearer seatbelt. Rumors that the seatbelt had malfunctioned spread swiftly across the right after, while some conjectured that it had been changed prior to the race. Others thought it had ripped upon hit. However, team members and medical professionals denied those rumors. Tommy Probst, one of the rescuers who attempted to save Earnhardt's life, said in public that the seatbelt stayed whole when he got to the scene. In either case, the outcome was the same. The head trauma was deadly enough on its own. Absence of a device to support the head and neck, an important part was played by the Hans device. The gadget was not required by NASCAR at the time, and Earnhardt, who felt it restricted his range of motion, had refused to wear one. Other drivers provided his viewpoint. Overnight, that changed. An internal review was initiated by NASCAR nearly right away. In a matter of days, the group started reviewing crash reports, assessing automobile elements, as well as speaking with medical professionals to determine how precisely one of the biggest legends in sports had perished in what appeared to be a crash that could have been survived. They discovered devastating evidence. The vehicles were excessively stiff. The walls were very rigid. The safety equipment was antiquated for a sport that had spent decades emphasizing seeing your dad pass away and you never forget what happened in front of you at 200 miles per hour. Regarding Junior, the sorrow became inspiration. He introduced a new generation of racers to the Earnhardt name, winning competitions, becoming the most popular driver each year, and promoting safer racing conditions in the process. The manner in which Dale Earnhardt passed away had an eerie quality. It wasn't dramatic, but because it was silent. Suddenly, to the untrained eye, it is nearly imperceptible. Not a cigarette. No fires. A man who had experienced everything that the sport had to offer, undone by a single, ideal combination of fate and physics. Perhaps this is the reason why the Globe recalls it so well. Because anyone could experience it if it could happen to him. How a single death changed an entire sport when Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s passing was officially announced. Something changed. In the NASCAR culture, it went beyond just mourning. The time has come for reckoning. For many years, the sport had to walk a fine line between life-threatening risk and exhilarating spectacle. Mishaps were to be expected. The entertainment included crashes. However, the passing of the Intimidator was not like the others. The loss of a legend was not the only thing. A call to arms was issued. NASCAR executives started a thorough internal inquiry within a few hours. Each and every frame rewatched the racing film. All of Earnhardt's number 3 Chevrolet's mechanical parts were investigated. Examined were medical records, vehicle telemetry, and even pieces of seatbelts. Nothing was forbidden. An increasing number of people realized that if Earnhardt could pass away in what seemed to be a moderate crash, then a basic issue occurred. Furthermore, something needed to be repaired. They discovered something disturbing. The vehicles were now tougher, faster, and more aerodynamic. However, doing so increased their risk of being involved in an accident. The car transferred extra force to the driver in the same way that its stiffness caused it to cut through the air. An effect. It was similar to being inside a fiberglass and steel missile. Then the walls appeared. Everywhere, unforgiving and concrete. When they were struck by a car, the entire force was mirrored within. Daytona's course was built for speed, not for survival. Earnhardt struck the exterior wall of Turn 4 at an angle that directed all of his energy directly into the cockpit. There was nowhere for that energy to go. And it was lethal. The reaction was instantaneous. The Research and Development Center was established by NASCAR, a facility specifically designed to increase motorist safety. They started consulting with trauma doctors, collision experts, and biomechanical engineers. Racing was no longer possible. Afford to consider injuries to be regrettable side effects. The focus had to shift to prevention. The initial innovation concerned restraint systems. In a matter of months, the Hans device was eliminated. Optional. The driver's helmet was secured to the shoulders by this head and neck support system, avoiding the fatal whiplash that resulted in Earnhardt's fractured skull. Future drivers wearing the device would now be physically unable to make the same maneuver that killed him. The safer barrier then appeared. The energy reduction system made of steel and foam took the place of naked energy-absorbing and energy-distributing concrete walls made of layers. These barriers, which were created by engineers at the University of Nebraska, reduced crash forces by as much as 70% by acting as shock absorbers. They were first deployed in Indianapolis before swiftly spreading to all of the main NASCAR racetracks. The vehicles themselves were drastically altered. In 2007, the Car of Tomorrow was unveiled. Included elements in the cockpit that absorb energy, a stronger ceiling, and a bigger structure. To lower the chance of a side impact, the driver was moved farther away from the entrance. Trauma. They redesigned the roof flaps. Upgrades were made to roll cages. Every square inch of the car was reimagined with a single question in mind. How can we prevent the death of the next Dale Earnhardt? There was a mixed response from the public. Dedicated followers were worried that the sport would become overly controlled, too sluggish, too sanitized. Some even claimed that NASCAR had taken advantage of Earnhardt's passing to defend commercial redesigns. However, the majority were aware of the stakes. The loss, it couldn't be for nothing that one of the best drivers in history was born. The sport should at least take lessons from Dale Earnhardt's death. The changes were welcomed by drivers, some initially grudgingly. The Hans device had been opposed by many, saying that it was constrictive or uncomfortable. However, after witnessing the events of that February, resistance disappeared in the afternoon. The next autopsy report was something no one wanted to be. Different training methods were used by pit workers, engineers, and crew chiefs. Safety exercises became commonplace. A thorough analysis of crash simulations was conducted. The time of flying by the instinct was over. Now data ruled. Earnhardt was everywhere, even if he was no longer there. His image was still used on products. In homages, his name reverberated. His third became a sacred number. More importantly, though, his passing served as the benchmark for all subsequent safety decisions. Every updated procedure, every softer barrier, and every new helmet held a bit of his legacy. A remarkable event occurred in the years that followed. The NASCAR fatality rate fell to 0. No driver has lost their life in a major NASCAR race, event that has occurred since 2001. There have been terrifying collisions, aerial tumbling, vehicles that burned to the ground after splitting in two. However, the drivers left, shaken, bruised, but still living. And Dale is brought up each and every time. Even now, when NASCAR fans discuss the current era of safety, they don't begin with the guidebook. They all begin with the same name. Just one number. One collision on the Daytona 500 lap. Because NASCAR woke up on that day. And it didn't ever sleep again. The autopsy report. What was discovered in the vehicle? Millions of people witnessed the collision, but the truth about Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s fate was hidden inside his body and the wreckage, and within the quiet of the first people on the scene. For weeks, the general public desired clarifications. Not gossip, not conjecture, actual responses, and they came from the autopsy. However, such responses weren't merely clinical. They were disastrous. The Volusia County Medical Examiner's Office conducted the formal autopsy. Daytona is not far away. The results were quick and easy to understand. Dale Earnhardt passed away immediately due to a deadly basilar skull fracture, is the type of injury from which very few people recover. The report's description wasn't a strange mishap. Human weakness and mechanical mechanics were a match made in heaven. His head violently snapped, causing a ring fracture at the base of his skull, forward and then backward following the wall collision. Neither a helmet nor a seat that could prevent that in the absence of a head constraint. Earnhardt didn't have one on either. However, there were other injuries outside the cranium. The autopsy found a damaged sternum, broken ribs, serious chest trauma brought on by the 5-point harness, as well as a fractured left foot. The seatbelt itself was closely examined. Some believed it was cut. It broke on impact, according to others. There appeared to be a tear in the photos. There were a lot of theories. An internal investigation into the integrity of the belt was started by NASCAR. They conducted safety interviews. Engineers examined production specifications and examined comparable incidents. Tommy Probst, who stood by what he witnessed while trying to revive Dale on the track, the belt was fastened. However, some, such as the members of Richard Childress Racing's crew, said that the belt had completely sheared. The discomfort was exacerbated by the mystery. Earnhardt's seat was even called into question. It was mounted too low, according to certain theories. Overly relaxed. Was it a decision of comfort? A predilection for visibility? Or an error that increased the likelihood of a fatal injury? The inquiry was unable to conclusively state, however, it brought up an awkward reality. The difference between tragedy and survival can be determined by even the tiniest element. Fans have been wondering if he suffered, and the autopsy provided an answer. The response was no. When Dale Earnhardt's head broke, he was probably unconscious. Death